Hi, everyone. Happy Friday, firstly. Thanks for joining me on a Friday evening at 8 p.m. Singapore time. I really appreciate your time on a week, obviously on a weekend. VCTV is the venture capital TV from LATOKEN, where we connect investors like yourself with startups, because our startups are looking for help, are looking for investors like yourself. They're looking for
Hi, everyone. Happy Friday, firstly. Thanks for joining me on a Friday evening at 8 p.m. Singapore time. I really appreciate your time on a week, obviously on a weekend. VCTV is the venture capital TV from LATOKEN, where we connect investors like yourself with startups, because our startups are looking for help, are looking for investors like yourself. They're looking for Hi, everyone. Happy Friday, firstly.
Has anyone got the session open? Okay. I think Emmanuel had the session open. Thank you so much for putting yourself on mute. My apologies for that. So Venture Capital TV, VCTV from LATOKEN is a platform where we connect investors with startups, because our community of startups founders are looking for investors for raising fund. So every week we cover different topics, and this week we covered many other topics. Today is the end of the week. I thought of having a topic very close to my heart. It's about investments into education tech. Today we have speakers who have been on the show before. They have spoken about different technologies. Today they're going to speak about education tech and the investments around it. So we have Cheryl Thiel from Singapore. Hi, Cheryl. Welcome back. Happy Friday.
Hi, hello everyone.
Hey, nice to have you back on VCTV. And the next speaker is all the way from Canada, Patrick. Hi, Patrick. Welcome back. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for joining me today.
Excellent, excellent. I'm very glad that I'm ending my week with two great speakers. So today it's about investments into education tech space, because a lot of things have been going on in education tech space since the COVID-19, lockdown. So let me just start with a short introduction about each of you, because we have new viewers who are watching you today. So for them, they would like to know what you do and which company you represent. But before that, I'd like to introduce myself as well. Myself, Sunny Mohanty. I'm the Regional Director of LATOKEN, and I'm based here in Singapore. And I welcome you all to another episode of VCTV. The first speaker I would like to introduce is Cheryl Thiel. Hi, Cheryl. Can you please introduce yourself and the company you represent? Thank you.
Hey, hi, everyone. I'm Cheryl. I'm from Vantage Venture. We're based in Singapore. We're an early stage seed funding focused venture firm. So we focus on a whole range of variety of industries. So we are considered, industry agnostic. We have invested in EdTech before, and I will be really happy to share some insights on this space tonight.
Great, thank you. Awesome, fantastic. Patrick, over to you.
Yes, I'm Patrick Poirier. I'm a general partner at Dragon's Vault. Dragon's Vault, it's a globally distributed investment fund that make investment in crypto assets, but also in entrepreneurs, as well as their startups. So we have several different funds to make our investments.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that short bio introduction. So because it's a Friday, let's just keep it easy. No, it's not easy. I didn't mean easy. Let's just chill out a bit. So Cheryl, I'd like to ask you a question. So could you just tell our viewers, like, how EdTech, like education tech industry, is different from other industries? I mean, yeah, just let's start with that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I personally really enjoy working with and speaking with EdTech startups. It's really interesting because most of all, this is an industry where basically there is always a do-good aspect to it, right? Education is great for upskilling, upgrading, and especially with the COVID pandemic, I feel that it has really changed the landscape in EdTech. People are more aware of the need to constantly upgrade themselves and stay up to date, especially for higher learning education techs, startups. I personally enjoy this space a lot because you're starting to see a lot of integration of AI as well as different aspects of even HR tech together with EdTech right now.
Okay. Great. HR tech and EdTech. Wow, that's interesting.
I think that is the future after COVID, because whenever you think about HR tech pre-COVID, many times it's just about managing your employees or the resumes. But I think that the future of EdTech would be a great synergy between HR techs and EdTechs.
Interesting, very interesting. So, Patrick, we just got to know Cheryl's views about education tech.
Yeah.
So, can you tell me, for the first thing that comes into mind when somebody says EdTech is online education, like which obviously we all know about it, even way before COVID-19. So, can you explain, like now and in current scenario, current situation, how different it is from what it was before COVID-19?
Yeah. So as an investor, EdTech is kind of considered almost like a black sheep. And one of the reasons is that historically speaking, there's been very few exits in the $1 billion. So unicorns are very rare in between. So as an investor, it's really difficult to make early stage investment with high capital. So that's why it's very difficult to finance innovation in that industry, because if the exits tend to be lower, like in the hundreds of millions as opposed to $1 billion, when you invest, you have to make sure that you're getting like around at least 10x. You should be aiming for that as an investor. So that means when you invest, you have to put much more, like a smaller amount of money when you cut a check. So this is why a lot of people consider it's a black sheep. And when it comes to the trend, is that especially in Asia compared to North America, we are starting more and more to see unicorns. So that means that investors will be going deeper into making investment that are larger and larger, like seed rounds that are like bigger. And the thing that's a trend that is changing, but it's not entirely there yet. So for any kind of startup in EdTech, as Cheryl pointed out, you have the do good aspect, the social impact. So if you can kind of link slightly less financial aspect, you may still have a chance to score an investor. But if you only look at the financial aspect, you need to be a lot more advanced and have traction in order to attract an investor in that industry, because again, the exits tend to be smaller. But like when you look compare Asia to North America, you have a lot more unicorn in Asia than North America in that regards. So that's all things to consider.
Right. Great, Patrick. Great opening, both of you there. Because you obviously touched upon the topic about social impact, I have a question following that. What is the best way to finance social impact? I'd like to ask Cheryl about that.
I really think it depends on what the investors are looking for. There are even investors out there who focus entirely on social impact, right? So it's almost like an industry or genre of its own. So there's many ways, as what Patrick was saying. With a lot of education tech startups, the first thing that investors would ask is, what is your traction? Right. And then how much have you guys worked on the software, and how many tutors, and are you working with governments to support your business? In Asia itself, the EdTech industry space has definitely accelerated in growth over the past few years compared to other parts of the world. But I find that the social impact side hasn't really been touched on yet, even though it's something that's so intrinsic and obvious. So I think this will be a really interesting topic to discuss more tonight.
Interesting. Thank you. So, Patrick, what's your opinion about the best way to finance social impact?
Yeah, I think before I was an investor, I spent 6 years trying to build a AI company for education. So I went all over the place to try to get funding, and it's a very difficult market. I think the best way would be to try to find a large corporation that have a corporate responsibility kind of a team. This way, they might make strategic investment, not so much for the large financial impact, but more as a way for themselves to demonstrate that they are trying to make an impact, a good impact on society. So they would be less concerned with traction and with financial return. Depending on which target market you're looking at, you may always be able to find one of such large company that will be willing to put a few $1 million just to improve their image. I think that's one thing that entrepreneurs should be looking into more, having those strategic relationship.
Oh, with the big enterprises. Okay.
I think it's important as well to differentiate that within EdTech, the EdTech industry itself, there are multiple types of EdTechs. The type that is for higher learning, children, pre-K, high school. So there's a lot of different layers. So it really depends on which type of EdTech we're talking about.
Exactly.
Right. Excellent. So that brings to my next question, Cheryl. Can you tell us about a recent investment into an EdTech space, about your portfolio company in the recent times?
So recently, at least within the last 6 months, we have not made an investment into the EdTech space yet, but we are focused with helping one of our investees from a few years ago to raise a Series A that's coming up. I think about 2 or 3 months ago, we just raised a bridge round of 18.5 million. So what's interesting, as I said, is even though we are still open to investing in more EdTech startups, but we just haven't closed one round yet. But what's interesting is that I see, especially after the pandemic has started, people are really, at least founders are really considering about finding ways to synergize with other industries. So there are, for example, if you're going to have an EdTech that's focused on children, then you might want to work with the government, or at least B2B, have a B2B model rather than a B2C. And whereas most of the higher learning education tech startups are having more of a B2C or B2B2C model. So it's a bit different. And I see more synergies with other industries, especially after the pandemic.
So the EdTech startup, which is you're exploring to fund a Series A. So are they into primary education or
higher learning? Higher learning.
And they are, what's a differentiating factor? How are they different or unique from other EdTech that you would have seen? Anything different?
So one funny thing is that where we hear often is the more profitable an education tech startup, the more boring it sounds. Because you don't need to spend so much dollars per user acquisition. So you don't really hear of great, wonderful, miraculous stories for EdTech, unlike Coursera, Udemy. But why we invested in this startup was because we found that the business model was really sound, and it's a B2B EdTech startup. So it tends to be produced much slower than the regular B2C EdTech startups that we hear about, like Coursera.
Okay, and what about the founders? Are they from Singapore? They're from Asia, or?
Yes, they are from Southeast Asia, which is of course good because we are a Singaporean-based company. So it always helps, but we are learning a lot as well because One thing that most founders may not know is that Southeast Asia and Asia / China / India is a very different market. So Southeast Asia is grouped together as one, and then China is one, and then India is one. So that's when the unicorns that tend to come out from Asia itself tend to be more focused on the China and India aspect.
Right. Great. Excellent insight, Cheryl. Patrick, over to you. So what are your recent investments in the space that you can share with our audience today?
Yeah, I think we are a really new fund that got incorporated just a few weeks ago. We're looking at, we are doing due diligence right now on a deal in the US. It's for what they call learning pods. It's essentially like micro schools where you would have a teacher teach maybe a group of just 4 kids, like K-12, like not in a school, like in an apartment of either the teachers or the parents of the children. So this way you're not having as much risk in terms of spreading the virus. Because a lot of parents in the US are afraid to send their kids back to school because it will spread the virus quite a lot, especially if you have their grandparents living in the same house. You don't want the kids to go get the virus and then bring it back home. So that's a large concern at the moment right now because of the COVID. So we're looking at making a deal with them where essentially instead of the parents paying tuition, they would contribute to an endowment fund for their kids. And we would manage the endowment fund, and all the performance of the fund would be used to finance the operations of the school and paying the teachers and all that stuff. Once the kids finish school a few years later, we would return the capital back to the parents. So essentially, there would be no tuition at all. There's a risk that we may not be able to return all the fund if the performance of our investments are not that great. But it's no worse than paying tuition and never recovering that money at all. So we think that's like a really special and different way of financing education, especially for K-12s, that is not based on trying to sell something new to the population. You're just tweaking the financial model behind it. And I think it will be a better pill to swallow overall.
K-12, when you say K-12, are they?
It's the kindergarten to grade 12. Yeah.
So are the tuition fees that expensive? That
for private school, yes, and especially right now, like it's sometimes it could be as high as $10,000 a year of tuition.
Okay, so does that mean that the parents get to save a lot when they are, putting that money in the fund, in your fund?
But that means that they could recover at least part of that money or all of it, maybe even extra. Because if our investment is actually getting a good return, the parents would be able to recover part of the higher return also. So it will be like they are investing in a trust fund for their kids.
But they are actually, sorry, carry on.
No, we just think it's a better model if it turned out to work, and we're quite confident that it will. So it's so we are basically making it a fintech model on top of the education model. So the product is education, but we are making money on the financial aspect of it.
Very interesting and very unique model, to be honest.
Like crossing EdTech with fintech.
I didn't get the question, sorry.
It's like crossing the synergies with EdTech meets fintech.
That's exactly what you said earlier with bridging HR with EdTech, is that nowadays you can use a business model that is not EdTech related. Your target market could be education, but you're bringing a business model that is not related to EdTech itself. So you don't have to focus so much on the social impact, on all those things. It's a side benefit, but in our case, we're targeting the fintech business model itself, which is where investors are not afraid to make investments because they know the exits value are pretty high for fintech.
I think what's interesting is that if you ask a founder who is freshly trying to enter the EdTech space, the first thing they would say is, "Oh, we want to be the next Coursera."
Yes.
Right? We want to be the next Udemy. But in reality, it's almost as it's the same as saying we want to be the next Facebook. It's not almost impossible, if not impossible. So I think what's interesting for the trends, Sony, as you were asking, is more of that synergy and really using education as a medium to achieve financial goals and even fundraising.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that is that like, depending on like, for example, we can differentiate between corporate learning versus K-12, to come back to it, or even university.
Right.
The market for university and K-12 is kind of already super well defined and existing. As opposed to corporate learning, you could have a growth of new customers. So it's really challenging to go steal the lunch of someone else. It's very hard because the sales cycle of K-12 is horrible. The decision maker take decision once a year, and then you have to wait. You have like just a few months to sell. And then, for example, in the US, if you want to cover the US territory to sell to K-12, you have 2 months to do it when they take decision of their next budgets. And it takes about 600 salespeople to make those connections to cover the entire market. And you have only 2 months to do it. It's really hard to achieve market shares. As opposed, if you're targeting corporate learning, you could start small and grow. And as the corporation grow themselves, get more customers, let's say that it's Amazon. Amazon is growing. So now they have more demand for the learning aspect. So that's a growing market. So it's really important to differentiate between those two because it's really hard to steal someone's lunch, as you were saying.
Business model, B2B,
Yeah.
B2B2C, it's very different, right? I would even say that there is one more age group which we don't really hear of, which is early childhood, which is baby to K.
Yeah.
But I think that even YouTube might be having a foothold into this into this demographic because with they launched YouTube Kids, and who knows, they might even expand into education in the next few years since they already have that the traction and the numbers.
Yeah.
Correct. So, so I just want to know from each of you, what are the challenges that the EdTech startups are facing? Because I think it's quite a crowded space, if I can understand, after fintech. So, what are the challenges they're facing, and how do you sort of what are the best practices that you follow before filtering out a startup? Cheryl?
In my opinion, it really depends. So it's categorized from the continents, the countries that you're coming from. So say an education tech startup in Nigeria, for example, would be facing a lot of issues trying to onboard quality teachers and students who are going to be using the app very often, compared to a place like Singapore, where it's going to be a lot easier because most people here also speak one language, which is English. So for us at Vantage Venture, our investment thesis is that we try to invest in founders who have a chip on their shoulder. So we would like to hear something that's a bit more interesting, not just the usual EdTech stories that we usually get. So I think because of that, we don't share the same issues with conventional VCs about just traction or just the financial models. We try to really dive deep and expand into why the startup is around, what is their mission, But I think that's really unique as well, because we want unique stories.
Makes sense. Great. Thank you, Cheryl. So what about you, Patrick, because you obviously cover a different region, as a bigger region. So what are the challenges and what are your best practice advice to the founders?
The thing is, so maybe I can mention one thing about North America, is that it's highly focused on learning outcomes. And you cannot prove your learning outcomes until you've actually experimented on the market. So your first few years will be very slow to get started. And once you've actually done some independent study to demonstrate that what you're offering as an improvement of learning, and usually you want to partner with an outside organization that is independent to demonstrate this. Once you have those metrics, then you can go back and start scaling. But you already wasted a year or two getting there. So it's a really hard to get started. And when you're discussing the thing with investors that have a time horizon of 7 years, it's hard because they will have only 5 years to start scaling your business to help you scale. And again, the exits are low on average. So trying to get money from typical investors in the EdTech market, that's a hard sell. That's why I suggest maybe to look at corporate responsibility of existing businesses, look at other ways to get finance by tweaking your business model so that it's EdTech is just your point of entry, but it's not where you make money.
Right.
And the things that I don't know as much on the Asian market, it's very possible that there's not as much importance on the learning outcome. And that would be a question I would be curious to know from Cheryl, if that's the case.
Sonny, what do you think?
Learning outcomes. Well, to be honest, I don't have much idea about that space, but talking about just generally as a user of an educational platform, I don't think that's the case, Patrick. I mean, people will only tune in into a EdTech platform as long as it's very much, I think, targeted, a demographic specific, educational, interactive, interesting. And when it comes to children, it has to be more engaging as well, because what I've realized, the schools over here, because of the lockdown, they switched over to Zoom very fast, very quickly, because the lockdown. But as a parent, I'm a parent, as a parent, I could see that model really didn't work well. So if that becomes mainstream, then they have to come up with some, like, like AR, VR, like gaming, game-based education to keep the children motivated, talking about children, to keep them engaged and motivated. I mean, they obviously are playing games, right? So that's one thing, if you ask me, is something is going to be very useful if a tech startup is planning to scale from just an online education. But as an adult learning is different from child learning, I would say. So that was my personal experience, Patrick.
Okay.
Yeah, I think as Patrick said, definitely the North American and Asian startups, EdTech startups, do have different focuses. So the EdTech startups I have spoken with in the US, they tend to be more niche. They have unique selling points in each idea that they have. Whereas in Asia, it seems to be more of a learning process. People want to, people, I don't know, you call this the Asian mentality, right? Where you just want to keep learning, you just want to keep upgrading. But what's interesting, I find, is that in Asia itself, it's much more commonplace to get government support. So it's not just B2B, B2C, it's also G2G.
Okay.
And I think I think a big reason is because we do have an inclination to want to upgrade our skills, whether it's from early childhood to K-12 or higher learning. I think that in Asia, if you can summarize it in one sentence, that's different from the US. The US will be outcomes focused. Asia will be looking more for innovation as well as creativity.
That's
Because
very interesting.
what Asia is known for compared to the US is people here in the broader scope of things. You hear of Asian parents, right? Asian tiger parents. So
Yes.
people are very good with the pen and paper. But I think that because of this culture shift and this culture difference where we want to be more globalized and we want to open up to at least to what we find the Western counterparts are better at is more of the creativity and innovation, and it can come through AI, it can just be through better teaching or even technological advances. But I think it's very different from the US where it's not just outcome based, which is more niche.
Yeah, I'd like to add to Cheryl's point. In Singapore specifically, there's a lot of government backing, especially when it comes to education, upskilling of the employees and the citizens. So yeah, it's very much actually driven by the government, especially in Singapore. So what about Patrick in North America and Canada? Is it like, do you see a lot of government involvement in the space or?
There is, but it's heavy lobbying. So whoever company has good relationship, they will get deals, as opposed to a startup that come out of nowhere will never be able to get a deal with the government organization. And partly is because government, in order to get involved, they don't want to give bias. So they have a procurement process that is really public and open. But the small company cannot afford to bid on those projects. The big company will have a lot more credibility and the financial strength to go through the process because it's a really long process.
Right.
So unfortunately, it's early startup. It's not easy to get government money for that.
Wow, good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we are like 30 minutes into the session. I just want to know, okay, because startups also need to be very innovative. Be it fintech, be it edtech, be it medtech, there must be something different, a differentiating factor that will make you stand out from other startups. So what are the emerging areas, emerging products that you see in the education tech space that will make a founder or a startup stand out differently from another traditional edtech startup?
Patrick? It's always me.
To anyone who can raise their hands. I mean, I didn't want to obviously put a spotlight on anyone. Please, anybody willing to take this question? Patrick?
But I'm saying I like the mixed reality and the VR, all that kind of stuff, especially for I would say more like a process orientation. I've seen some really good use case of factory work where you have a AI system with a camera that look over what you're doing and kind of superimpose how you should be doing things. So you could guide the factory worker how to do the work. Let's say that you're doing some fixing or putting a piece onto like a huge mechanical and complex piece of technology. Like let's say that you're working on a Tesla factory, building cars. When you're new as a worker, it takes time to learn. But if the AI is able to analyze your movement and what is the current step of the process, it can guide you, show you a video while you're working to guide you. And especially if you have an helmet, I've seen a use case from Germany where you have the helmet and you see like holographic ends making the movement and what you should be doing. So it can guide you to make sure that the information is fresh and you don't make a mistake. And that can increase, or I would say, increase the quality of the final product because you make less mistakes. It's kind of a just-in-time education, if you would think like a bit like that. And it's not just purely intellectual, because when you think about education, it's often that you think about just intellectual type of learning.
Yeah.
But process learning is also really important, especially I used to do chemistry or experiment. And you could have an experiment that lasts more than an hour. It's really hard to memorize this, especially when the process change from experiment to experiment. And you make mistake early on and you waste products. So it's costly. So I could see this into drug development, all kinds of pharmaceutical company that have long, lengthy process that are complex. To have AI technology, VR technology working together to guide the human being doing the work itself.
Right.
So that's the kind of niche that I would look into for innovation, but it's really expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine it is expensive, but we don't know what the future holds, and because factory is a place, factory in the a lot of workers working together in mass at one location, right? I mean, and because of social distancing and physical distancing, I think that's a perfect use case for a company to invest into that technology using AI and VR.
Yeah, but you could consider that it could be used even for people at home. Like right now, a lot of people learn on YouTube, like a do-it-yourself guide, but it could be VR-oriented, those guides also, and step-by-step, that it analyze what you're doing to kind of guide you while you're doing it, as opposed to watching the video and trying to replicate on the spot.
Right, right.
So as Patrick said, in my perspective, I completely agree. And I think this is when webinars like this is good, because it really talks about what's been done, what's super hot right now, but what investors are thinking of and looking off into the future, right? EdTech done in collaboration with the corporate companies, and even expanding that the database of people, because instead of just targeting in the education tech sector people up to the age of 25, for example, usually that's the max of higher learning. It goes all the way through, and maybe you don't even, I mean, with the pandemic, right, it's shown us we don't actually physically need to be in a classroom to upgrade our skills anymore. So
Right.
AI and VR is really important. And I really wonder, because it opens up a new, again, it's the synergy, right? Because it brings in hardware, it brings in software, and then the governance aspect as well. And I really wonder if in the next 10 years, this will be so commonplace that all you need to do is just have an algorithm that's able to immediately identify the pain points of different teaching environments and fix it just like that.
Yeah. Also, there's a personalization. That's a big thing in education now as well, to try to not use a generic template, but analyze what the students are learning and where they are at, and then feeding the right content at the right time, so that to push them to learn. Because one of the worst thing is that having a student learn the same thing over and over without pushing, they get bored. And if it comes too fast and they are challenged too much, they may actually give up. So finding the right balance is really difficult. There was a lot of push on those personalization learning in the last 10 years. And I still think there's a lot of room to grow there. Because whenever you have like a teacher teaching students, the sample size is a bit too small, as opposed to a machine that kind of help you analyze that data. you could have hundreds of millions of students that the information could be analyzed to try to find which cluster you fit in so that the teaching is optimized for your learning style. And the human being cannot process that amount of data.
I think in Asia, especially in the next few years, is going to be big. I'm not sure, Sony, you know this. 2 days ago, the Singapore government actually announced that education is going to be changed in 2024 or 2025, one of those years, where secondary school or high school kids will be able to have individual personalized timetables. So people will not actually be forced to have a standard timetables like what we have right now. And I think, as Patrick said, because in Asia it is so government driven, I think that the first step that our government at least has done is going to drive many EdTech startups to drive towards personalization, because it's already a pain point that has been established.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Interesting.
One other
a little bit more on that, the personalized education that Cheryl?
Me?
Can you elaborate?
Patrick wanted to say something, right, about it.
Oh, you have a question? Sorry.
Oh, no, it was not a question. I just, but it's another topic, so maybe I could wait until you get your answers.
Go ahead.
But I was saying that AI and automation, that is something that in the next 2 years will have a massive impact on the skills required for people to interact with. And one example is that Autodesk, for example, they have a generative design software nowadays that instead of a designer that design a piece, let's say you're building like a bicycle, the design of the bicycle could be generated by the AI. And then the job of the designer is to pick between the different models to kind of guide the AI into making a new set of designs. So it's kind of like a genetics algorithm evolution, where the weak design get removed from the sample, and then you keep just making decision of what design looks great, and you have an interaction with the AI in real time. All those human in the loop type of process, I'm a big fan of those. So if there's any startup that are working on AI technology that is not there to replace the human being, but to work in real time with them, that's something I would definitely want to look into to make an investment.
Right. Talking about bicycle, does it apply to vehicles, other vehicles like cars and
That's saying the software is just a design software, like a CAD technology, like computer assisted design.
Yeah.
AutoCAD, there's I forgot the exact name, 3D Studio Max. All those software to help you design like a 3-dimensional piece could have the AI auto-generate designs for you and tweak the design for you. And like there have been cases where you can design a piece that is lighter and is stronger than if it was done by a human being. And when you think about it, a tree, evolution and nature push how the tree works, but there's no weak spot of a tree. Every part of the tree is built to be able to sustain the force of the wind and its orientation. So those design techniques are used in space, because you don't want to carry heavy weight material and equipment into space. It costs too much. So if you can save a few pound of your hardware, the thing a human being cannot think in those structure. It's too complicated. But the AI has no problem to design a piece that has a ton of space inside. It's kind of like a matrix of. You have to see it in order to understand. But yeah, I cannot explain it correctly. Sorry.
I think it's very interesting. I can probably check with you later after the session is over. Yeah. So, I mean, talking about design, I mean, if you see like fashion retail, industry, that can be disrupted as well using AI technology. I mean, there are a lot of students like fashion designers who, the aspiring designers, they can just sit at home and learn design through an AI technology. Don't you think so?
I
I
think
believe
that,
so.
yeah, for education, at least for the arts, I feel that it hasn't truly and thoroughly been disrupted. And I'm not sure. I'm looking forward to seeing and observing how the arts will be targeted, because the arts seem to be a very human kind of activity, right? It's not something that most people would gravitate towards using tech to learn compared to having a physical class with a teacher. So I wonder how much AI will be able to develop to the point that people are able to feel comfortable learning something artistic from a computer or from a phone. Or maybe the new generation of children that are brought up with computers and tech might be able to think differently from us.
Yeah. Sure.
Right? If let's say if let's say you want to teach someone to design something, maybe it's just a generation gap that might be the difference between whether the arts is going to be disrupted by tech or not.
Good point. Anybody,
Uh,
Patrick?
yeah, but I would tend to slightly disagree with that in the sense that the AI doesn't know what is good design or not. A human being does.
Mhm.
But the AI can generate various designs, and then it can A/B test. And then over time, you build a knowledge database of what is aesthetically pleasing to a human being. But it needs to be guided by a human being. So I think in terms of fashion, in terms of design, arts, I think we will see more of a synergy between the AI and the humans over time. And they will learn to interact with each other. You have to build the AI technology to be able to interact with the human being, and it was built not to just do prediction on its own, essentially. And the thing is, I think it will evolve more toward that in the future.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of both human mind and technology for sure. As rightly Cheryl said, I mean, we haven't seen it yet, but who knows, right? So, what's the future of education looking like? So, do you think with the future of events, the conferences that we all used to attend, obviously now it's all happening virtually, something like this on a bigger scale. We have seen many models evolve when it came to events specifically. I have seen virtual rooms, I have seen virtual networking tables. I have seen many when it came to the events industry being disrupted by technology. So do you think going forward in future, I mean, technology is going to be so adopted in education that we might see like a totally virtual education system? I mean, I'm just asking a question. What do you think,
Yeah,
Cheryl?
you're referring to K-12 or higher learning, right? Not corporate.
Um, well, I mean, generally, learnings. I mean, why not corporate? I mean, what's the challenge over there? I mean,
Um, I think is the fact that K-12 it's dealing with children. There is a social aspect when it comes to learning and teaching children how to learn to be around each other. So I don't think technology would completely ever replace in-person or physical learning. Due to this aspect, there's a psychological aspect as well, right? You want children to learn to be around each other and to work with each other. But when it comes to corporate, on the corporate side of things, I do see, in the future, you might be able to learn how to build a car without having, instead of just having one manager with you the whole time or one person teaching you the whole time, you can just be check-ins every once in a while. But I would disagree if the future is completely virtual for children, because I don't think that's going to be good.
That's not going to be good for sure. Social interaction. I mean, I have grown up totally 100% classroom coaching learnings. So I understand the difference between virtual learning for me. But the millennials, the people who are born in this 2020 century, I mean, I don't know how they're going to see technology. But so Patrick, what's your thoughts about it? What's the future of education going to be like?
So when you compare, like, let's say, going to school physically versus doing it online, the studies shows that you will complete your degree a lot less if it's done online purely. So you don't have that same pressure to study, to prepare for an exam. You don't have that same pressure to keep attending. Sometimes you can just press a button to accelerate the speed. You skip over sections. It's very different. And then MOOCs.
Customization.
Yeah, exactly. So the MOOCs, I think on average, the completion rate of a degree is extremely low, like 5 or 10%, if I remember. I think if we want to move more toward doing it virtually, we need to fix this issue. And I had thoughts about this topic in a while back. It comes back down to having interaction with the students. Students that go to school physically, at some point they get to want to just meet with their friends. As opposed if you're doing it online and you don't interact with other students, you don't have that same feeling of you're having friends in a sense.
That's true.
How many, like in high school, how many kids end up hooking up like girlfriends, boyfriends? If you're removing that from the education system, it's a large kind of incentive that is there. If someone compliments you that you're good, you succeeded well, it's part of your relationship with others, for love, for all kinds of stuff like that. And if you're missing that, it's a problem that needs to be fixed before you can bring back that 5-10% to maybe 80% completion rate.
Yeah,
and it needs to happen.
Yeah, I think that because education is so intrinsically linked to human behavior, that the EdTech space will never become one that is growth at all cost. There will always be, something that you need to compromise on. And I think that is always going to be this human behavior, human psychology. And I feel that, no matter how AI or how well we humans are able to work with the AI, there's always going to be this question of, are we ready for this in our lives? More than we should just adopt it just for the sake of innovation.
Right. Got it. Very good points. So we just have a few more minutes before we end the session. I just want to ask you, Cheryl, any particular niche that you are interested to invest in the next 3 to 6 months or a year?
Can Patrick answer this first so I can think about it?
Yeah, sure. Take your time. It's okay. We should all take our time before we really can answer a question. Yeah. Patrick.
Yeah, for me, everything that has to do with like, we're really big on trying to build endowment fund, so that instead of someone paying right now and they just consume the education, that it's an investment, and then we take care of the fintech behind. That's something we are 100% behind, that we want to target. Meanwhile, all that kind of synergy or symbiosis between AI and people, because as automation go through the next 30 years, I think it's a skill that people will need to develop to be able to use AI technology properly. So that means new interface to software. That means all kinds of new things like that, robotics. So anything that has to do with those topics, we're interested to look into. In terms of
skill-based Based learning. Okay, cool.
All this aspect of personalization and just-in-time knowledge, that's something I'm big on.
Right.
Because you don't need to memorize things. And that's a big issue here. And if anybody has a solution to that, that's extremely important.
Yeah.
I was talking to a company that was building AI technology for the law industry. And they are saying that they can have an AI software that replace early job entry. The problem is the early job entry for a lawyer. So there's things that they do, like as they build their knowledge, that the AI technology can do better than them. The problem is that if you have the AI technology do that work, those entry-level jobs no longer exist, and the people cannot become an expert in their field anymore because they are not exposed to that 10,000 hours of learning something at the base. So that's a huge challenge. As AI technology still those entry-level jobs, are we going to have a shortage of people who are trained and skilled because they are not exposed to learning it by themselves, because they're not efficient at doing it? So if anybody has a solution to that, that's a big deal, big problem.
Interesting. Very good points. And that's very interesting use case, to be honest. Something
Yes.
new that I learned today. Thank you, Patrick. So Cheryl,
avoidance of growth at all costs, because it's really going to affect the infrastructure of how each industry works if that's going to happen. I think that I will be really interested to have a look at what the progress is going to be like and how tech is going to be integrated into the education system from K to 12. So, those who are from Gen X to millennials to Gen Z to Gen Y, I don't even know how many generations there are now. The education system has changed a lot. And I wonder if there's going to be, I'm sure there's going to be more and more at tech spaces, just in that K to 12 space, once governments start to be more open to teaching maybe even 6-year-olds how to code, right? I wonder if it'll be a compulsory topic. I'm just adding on to what Patrick said because I completely agree with him. But I also am wondering how the developing countries and the developed countries, how that skill gap is going to be stretched out. If you understand what I mean. Because what if it's just the few countries around us who are adopting this? How do we bridge that to the developing countries? I think that would be really interesting to find out. Do you teach them real skills, or do you teach them a proper like traditional education, or do you teach them like really skill-based learning type of classes? I think that's a question that a lot of us will be interested to see what the different governments around us will be choosing.
Good points. Excellent. I learned a lot about education today, and the technology that aligns to education. Thank you very much, Cheryl and Patrick. Any closing remarks before we close the show from each of you? Patrick, any closing remarks, because you've been on our show before?
Yes. One thing that I would like to see from the education industry is to get rid of removing points. Like when you're grading an assignment, an exam, it should never have existed that you remove points. You go from 100% to down. That is extremely demotivational. Games, on the other end, all the scoring is done upward. You start at 0, and for every good thing you do, you get points. That is extremely motivational, the way it's built. So that gamification aspect needs to become a trend in the education industry across the board. Whatever you do, it should be that you always can get more. This way you are pushed to get more and to continue, as opposed to if you keep losing points, at some point you just give up and you capitulate. And that's horrible for learning because it demotivates you.
That's a very good point, but that's going to democratize education system across the world, I guess. But
I'm
I
not
don't
sure.
know.
The Singapore government has also announced, along with that, the changes that they're going to change how there's going to be 3 different streams like 10, 20 years ago, but the number for our, say, PSLE and O levels are going to be removed.
From
So
next
that,
year.
no, I think 4 or 5 years, so that there will be less comparisons among students and parents. So
Yeah.
I really like what Patrick said. I think I really enjoyed myself tonight with Patrick's insights.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I did
think,
as well.
yeah, I think you're right in terms of like having a score versus a grade. Like, when I was a student, we used to have the percentage, like somebody gets out of 100, 80 or a 90 or a 75. But I think in Singapore, the private schools, they don't have that percentage. They have grades, like A is between this and this percentage, which is another step forward, I guess, in bringing bridging that gap between two children. So I am very hopeful. Whatever you guys shared today, the insights about future of education, obviously it's going to get better with time, and technology, of course, is an added factor to make it more efficient for our future citizens, because education is very vital and very important, as we all know. Thank you so much for sharing that. Cheryl and Patrick, all your profiles are getting featured on our website at www.latoken.com/profiles. Because our startups are today, they have tuned in, they are listening to you, they're trying to understand how they're going to scale up, or they grow, or sustain during these difficult times. And startups, those you have heard Cheryl and Patrick, and you're interested to reach out to them, go to the website and hit the pitch button on them. And we can arrange a session with Cheryl and Patrick, and they'll be more than happy to hear your project. Because both Cheryl and Patrick just shared they're looking for more innovative and more unique set of startups in the space. So they'll be more than happy. So startups, please go and hit the pitch button on www.latoken.com/profiles. Right? Having said that, we are bang on time, 9 p.m. on a Friday evening for us, for me and Cheryl. Thank you so much. I think, Patrick, your day is just starting, your weekend is just starting, which is good. Have a great day.
Exactly.
And for those who are just watching us, thank you so much for being with me on a Friday evening. Cheryl, thank you so much for being with me on a Friday evening as well. Hopefully we can just meet after this. Not today, over the weekend, or catch up over drinks or something. And thank you. And please don't forget, whatever it is, don't forget to stay safe. Please stay safe. Still, we're not over with coronavirus. The virus is still lurking around. Maintain physical distancing, social distancing. Stay safe, stay connected through our VCTV. I would urge every investor and startup to connect with us through VCTV. And thank you so much, and have a great day, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.